Are you trying to save your relationship? Because if so, don't be an Earl. So today's episode, I want to tell you a story about a guy, and by the way, I'm changing his name to protect the guilty. But a long time ago, I was working at the private psychiatric hospital as I was starting my outpatient practice, and there was a guy admitted to the hospital who was in there for alcohol treatment. He was an employee who handled dangerous type equipment, and he came to work one day smelling like alcohol, which meant mandatory treatment. And the guy's backstory was his wife had kicked him out because he'd been so argumentative with her and their 3 children, and she was just fed up with it. So he's living with his parents. He's depressed. He's really discouraged, wondering if his marriage could be saved. And he was drinking as a result of kind of licking his wounds, so to speak. And so one day he'd been up too late the night before drinking. He shows up to work. They smelled alcohol, and like I said, thus ended treatment. Well, I was one of his therapists in the private psychiatric hospital, and established a pretty good relationship with Earl, and I liked him. He was a nice guy. I never had a problem with him, and upon his discharge, his doctor referred him to me, where I continued his treatment for a continuity of care. And the guy struck me that he was really, really sincere. And after he'd kind of proven that to me, I said, would you like me to get your wife to come up here and see if this could be worked out? And he said, she won't come. I said, I can get her up here. And he was surprised, but I was able to get her up to the office with no problem. And so I had him all prepared. And when we met in the session, the wife did not sit close to him. She sat kind of across from him. And Earl poured out his heart. He said some of the most heartfelt things I'd ever heard up to that point in my life. And I was on the verge of tears, sitting here watching him tell his wife how much he missed her and how he really wanted to make things work. And tears were streaming down his face. And he glanced over at his wife, who was looking at him with this cold, removed look, like, I've heard all this before. And Earl stood up, and he started just cussing and flinging all these hand gestures at his wife, saying, you know, screw you, screw you, screw you. That's the cleaned up version. And he stormed out of my office, slammed the door. And the wife just kind of looked at me like, you know, that's what I deal with all the time. And so she and I continued to talk for a few minutes. And then there was this ever so gentle at the door. And it was Earl knocking. And he entered into the room very quietly. And he kneeled down before his wife. And he said, I'm sorry I did all that. I'm sorry. He said, but when I think about having to live my life without you, it just drives me crazy. And he was once again crying, and tears just falling down from his eyes to the carpet. And then he looked up, and the tears started streaming this way. And he looked up at his wife, who was still looking at him with these cold, removed eyes, like, I've heard all this before. And Earl stood up and screw you, screw you, screw you, took his wedding band off and flung it at her, and it ricochets all around the office, and he stormed out of the office. So the moral of this story is, don't be an Earl. If you are trying to save your relationship, it is very, very important that you demonstrate emotional control and that you are consistent. If you say you're going to change, you're going to be sincere. If you say you're going to go to therapy, you can go with or without your partner. You're going to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to turn your relationship around, because your partner knows you better than anybody, and they know when you're full of crap and when you're sincere. You need to show them that you're sincere. So if you're sincere, don't be an Earl. That's what great partners do. Thank y'all for tuning into this episode.